I want to thank you all for coming today. As most of you know, I'm Gary Simpson. I'm the Dean of the Law School here. I have the honor today of introducing our distinguished speaker. But first I wanted to thank two professors, Calvin Sharp and Kathy Hessler, the Director and Associate Director of the Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Conflict and Dispute Resolution, which is the center that organized this event. Calvin Sharp is the John D. Verdrinko Baker and Hostetler Professor of Law. He's been a teacher and scholar in labor employment law, evidence, and alternative dispute resolution, and done it here for almost 25 years. Professor Hessler teaches in the Civil Clinic and our Kramer Law Clinic, and also teaches animal law as a seminar. This center, which they created only a couple of years ago, seeks to develop in students, and of course students becoming graduates and attorneys, a greater sensitivity and skill in alternative dispute resolution. The lecture series is one of the means of achieving this. Each lecture in the series has a particular focus, one in theory, one in practice, and one that is really interdisciplinary. Maya Angelou was the inaugural speaker for the interdisciplinary lecture last year. On the theory front, the Center's Scholar in Residence annual lecture has now been delivered twice. It has included two leading scholars, Carrie Mako-Meadow, who's the chaired professor at Georgetown Law School, and Robert Manoogian, also a chaired professor at Harvard Law School. This year's Scholar in Residence lecturer is Professor Russell Korobkin of UCLA Law School, currently visiting at Harvard, and he will be here on October 3rd, so I hope many people will be back for that. Today's lecture is part of the Center's Distinguished Visitor Lecture Series, and that brings practitioners to share their insights from their experience. To date, we have had two, Dennis Ross, the Chief Middle East Peace Negotiator for Presidents Bush and then Clinton, and Kenneth Feinberg, who was the Principal Administrator for the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. Today's speaker, Max Factor III, is a very fitting successor to these esteemed practitioners. He has achieved his renown in the area of mediation. He's based in Los Angeles and specializes in mediations across a wide range of areas. Remarkably, he mediates more than 150 cases a year, and I can attest, I visited him in Los Angeles in the spring, and I can attest to the rigors of his work. When we had dinner, he that day had I think, 10 hours of mediation, which he'd had the day before, and we had to sort of conserve vocal energy during that meal because he had such a huge day. He's a graduate of Harvard College, where he majored in economics and was magna cum laude. He was a Yale Law School graduate, where he was a member of the Yale Law Journal. He clerked for Judge Celebrezzi in the Federal Appellate Court, the chambers based in Cleveland, so he spent 2 years in Cleveland right after law school. He then had 9 years in public service, first with the California Law Center, then with the Los Angeles Deputy City Attorney. He had many years in private practice, where he negotiated successfully with many high-powered companies, ranging from Hughes Aircraft to Polaroid to Hilton Hotels. And he's now had more than 7 years as a full-time neutral, and was recently chosen as one of the top neutrals in the United States. Among his many distinctions, he's a fellow of the International Academy of Mediators, a recent past president of the Southern California Mediation Association. He's an adjunct professor at the Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution. He's a member of the California Academy of Distinguished Neutrals, and he currently chairs the California State Bar Committee on the Administration of Justice. I just want to mention now that at the end of his address, he will take questions, so save your questions until then, and at that time, please raise your hand and wait to be handed a microphone before you begin speaking. There'll be a reception immediately after the lecture, and I hope as many of you as possible will join us there. We'll have an opportunity to speak with him. I'm honored to present to you then, as the Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Conflict and Dispute Resolutions, 2007 Distinguished Visitor, Max Factor III.
Thank you, Dean Simpson. I'm delighted to be here. I've had a lot of pleasant years in my life, but I spent 2 wonderful years here, 1969-70 and then 1970-71, working for Judge Anthony Celebrezzi, one of the clerks. He is here, Tom, and those are among my fondest days. He still lives in my mind as one of the fine, wise people that I have ever met. And I think it's fair to say none of us will take pleasure at someone else's sickness or loss. But there were supposed to be 2 law clerks, and one of the other law clerk, my cohort, took ill, and so I got to be the only law clerk for Judge Celebrezzi for 1.5 years. So besides having to work 6 days a week or 7 days a week, we learned an awful lot. And I actually went and looked on the internet because I couldn't remember how much awe I had of the different things he'd done. I don't have my notes here, but Medicare was passed when he was Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. The Clean Air Act was passed. The student loan bills we live with today were initiated by him. The Civil Rights Act was passed while he was Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. And I'm not mentioning all of what he did. An extraordinary leader and one of the most humble, soft-spoken people I have ever met. I see Tom shaking his head yes involuntarily. So Cleveland, to me, really has had some outstanding leaders, and I had the pleasure of working with one. And I guess Mayor Stokes was Carl Stokes came in as mayor and was also very, very foresighted during the 2 years we were there and thereafter. So I come back to Cleveland with a kind of quiet, pleasant chill, remembering how much, you get out of law school, many of you have done that already, and you feel like you've learned so much and you know so much, and then you meet a quiet, value-oriented, humble person, and you learn humility real quick. So I try and hold on to many of the things. When he thought I got a little too, I probably did, big for my riches, he took me out to his farm, he called it that. And it was this patch of land, and I had to spend the day plowing it. And I didn't learn how to plow at Yale Law School. We studied stuff, and I was on a law review, but plowing wasn't even a seminar. So I complained, and finally he said, look, if you keep complaining, you're going to come out here 1 day a week. Until you learn how to plow, what are you going to do when the revolution comes? If you can't grow your own food, where are you going to be? So I got it. I stopped complaining. Once I set about doing the physical tasks he set out for me on a regular basis, I suddenly found I didn't have to spend so much time on the farm. So back to the book. I was thinking about what would be most enjoyable, and I have a few pieces of paper. I hope they were handed out to you. One is called Hardball Bargaining Tactics. They're not all of the unreasonable things you can think of doing, but they're all that I thought of last night when I was preparing. And then I have response strategies to hardball tactics. Once again, the same thing. And I wrote down transformational moments. I have no idea why I used the word transformational, but I'm told that it's the word of art in academic circles. I thought I should use it. And but all these are real stories, other than I may have changed some fact or deleted the name of a person or an entity. I wouldn't use those. And then did you get the hardballs 1-2 punch and 3-1 counter punches? That was on the library there? Well, I got it. It'll be up. It'll be up on my website. I'm sure. Yeah, because I got it about a week ago, and my secretary's very efficient. I thought maybe it would be useful to just tell a story that really comes from one of the mediations that I worked on, and probably something like this has happened 50 times in the last 7 years, of the use of some hardball tactics and how they were handled, and then run through some other tactics and some possible responses, and then go to this transformational moment and just tell you some mediation stories. Because it's not in the pieces of paper and the outline of what you could do or would do. It's about working with people and respecting them and learning from them and trying to be a catalyst. I sometimes think of myself, this may not be terribly flattering for some of you, but I sometimes think of myself as that oil that you put in your car engine that allows it to run a little smoother and a little more quietly and not overheat. And what does a mediator do, after all? It's simply are a catalyst, hopefully, keeping things from overheating into hostility or breaking up, and giving everything the opportunity to run a little more smoothly and a little more sensibly. I actually was asked by Dean Simpson, the faculty workshop was on neuroscience, anger, fear, and some other interesting stuff. And I was asked, well, was one of the goals we had to get people to be rational in mediation? And I told him no. And that's because I'm not a big advocate, I'm not an advocate of rationality. I'm an advocate of healthy choices, which means you want to be doing things that are emotionally right for you. You want to be doing things that represent who you are as a person. And when you're helping people as a catalyst to reach an agreement, you want it to be an agreement that's durable and has integrity. And that's not about being rational. That's about being human. And the emotional component, at least in my judgment, is usually a much greater part of a good resolution in a conflict than is the rational component. Okay, I told you I have a big ego to Celebrezzi. But there is a book, no, not yet a book, now a longish article on my website called It's Not Just About the Money. And it's about kinds of emotions that really cement together deals and really act as a catalyst. So if you're interested, it's there. Let's just start, if I may, with one example. I think the best thing is let me identify the parties. This is a typical business dispute. There's a vendor. Who, for sake of today's talk, we'll call Hardball. He only goes by one name, he's a movie star. And the vendor has an attorney. And we'll call her Apple. These are not really accidental names. Our name is spelled right. Zoe, if I misspelled. Zoe took a class, my dispute resolution class in Pepperdine, and she can tell you we don't go through an hour without a couple of misspellings. So. Well, if I do, please feel free anybody to speak up. I have a low ego attachment. So, and it's not a mistake I'm calling her affable, because one of the most common techniques in hardball is good guy, bad guy. A bunch of lawyers here, right? Yes? I don't remember because I went to school 40 years ago, but just before I came here. See how that but Miranda or Escobedo, one of the two cases, you folks still study that, right? Yes. And I don't know, but we did because it was just recent. And this fellow, who was not a particularly likable fellow and was deficient mentally, and I don't remember if it was Miranda Escobedo, but I think it was Escobedo. He was picked up and jailed and accused of a serious crime. And he denied it, and he denied it, and he denied it, and they kept him in jail. And in the process, asking about him, they found out that he had a very strong attachment to his mother. And so they kept telling him that he was going to go to jail for one of the two policemen. He would go to jail for the rest of his life. He would never see his mother again. And there's nothing much to be done about it. The law is the law, and he committed this crime. And then the good cop would come in and say, I hate it when he talks like that. There are ways around it when people are truthful. And this went on for 6 days. And on the 6th day, either Mr. Miranda or Mr. Escobedo, I think it was Escobedo, confessed to the murder that he was accused of, that he didn't do. But he wanted to see his mother, and the good guy had created such a bond of trust, it made more sense to confess and not be in jail while his mother was old and died. Luckily, there are legal services available even 35 and 40 years ago. So when it got to the Supreme Court, they said, no. Hardball, bargaining, good guy, bad guy, which actually, when you read the Supreme Court opinion, was in the Bible for police. It was one of the top recommended tactics to get a confession, was to exploit a relationship of trust by being a good guy when you find out an emotional weakness of an individual, while the other person is on the other side of the issue. And if you do it long enough, it says right in the interrogation tactics, you can always get them to say what you want. So the Supreme Court not only reversed that conviction, by the way, he went out and committed another crime afterwards, but he was certainly helpful, though, to the legal process. But not only reversed it, but they expressly stated in the opinion that criminology textbook, which was the Bible, could not be used by police departments. That it was simply wrong. So there's something about Hardball. I know we read Moneyball and all these other books for baseball. There's something about this good guy, bad guy. We're making it a bad guy. Can I say gal or is that political? That's okay. The guy said I can say yes. I'm going to call them both guys. So these are these two characters. Then there's somebody who supplies the vendor, who will call. There's someone who supplies the vendor, who will call case supplier, who has counsel. Names. And OK Supplier sold a whole bunch of stuff to the vendor. They had a great relationship for 2-3 years. They did $250,000, $300,000 a year business. Everything was hunky-dory. OK Supplier felt the need to raise their prices. They did raise their prices slowly, stealthily, 1%, 2%. And over a period of 9 months or so, vendors started paying a little less and a little less, and started to get stuff from other countries overseas where it was less expensive. And what was left with was about a $100,000 dispute. Because vendor owed that much money, and vendor cut supplier off, and the lawsuit follows. And I really literally have had the equivalent of this suit 50 times. Sometimes it's a customer, sometimes it's a retailer. There are a litany of ways of saying dispute happens, but people with relationships get in disputes. So this particular mediation went 7-8 hours. We're downtown. The Waterville is a very nice restaurant in Los Angeles. Saget rated 27. And it's 2 blocks away. And the vendor announces, pretty close to word for word, I'm fed up. I'll pay you 60 cents on the dollar, not a penny more. You can take it or leave it. I'm going out to make a couple of calls. I'm having dinner with my wife at the water grill at 8 o'clock, and that's 15 minutes from now. You have 10 minutes to think about it, and walks out of the room. And the supplier is muttering under his breath angry words of disdain. Not appropriate to repeat, but we've heard them before at times. So I'm wondering what's going to happen. And fortunately, you know, for what it's worth, the supplier, after mumbling, says he wants to talk with his counsel for a moment, and Ms. Affable starts to empathize. And as soon as it happened, I realized what was happening. And she says, "You must feel terrible. We've been working all day. It looked like we were going to get to an agreement tonight. Now he's got to walk out for an appointment. He's lost his temper. You know, what happened to you is wrong. And if there's some way I can piece together, I know him pretty well. He's been, you know, I've represented him for years. Maybe, I'm just suggesting, if you could just come up a little, since you had such a good product that he was so pleased and it was just pricing, if you'll just come up a little, I'll bet I can get him to do more business with you, and we won't have any price disputes. We'll work it out." So, sure enough, OK supplier talks to the counsel and comes back and agrees to 65 cents on the dollar. He's going to pay he's going to get 5 cents more on the dollar than was being offered. And he wants $200,000 of business. And Affable says, "I don't know if I can do that or not, but I'm going to try," because he said, "till hell freezes over." But like I said, we have a long relationship. And then Affable comes back, warmly congratulates OK supplier. I sat there quietly. That's what neutrals are supposed to do. And the deal is made and written up, and everybody leaves happy. Affable's happy because she had, as I asked her later, what her instructions were. And she said I could go to 70 to 75 cents, just depending. And I asked OK, and OK said that was 5 cents below, but I'm going to get business from him again, and I'm going to make it up. Everybody left happy with a wise and durable agreement. The problem was that the hardball bargaining technique worked. And the OK person ended up getting shortchanged. So I thought it might be useful to explore some of the ways this could have gone, should have gone, and frankly, everything I'm going to tell you about are things that have happened in front of me. Sometimes I was part of it. In essentially the same situation. Because I've talked way too long, I'm going to ask somebody, you got a cheat sheet that should help me too. When someone does hardball bargaining, good guy, bad guy, and hopefully if you're a good attorney, you can, even if you haven't smelled it before it came, common sense, you should be able to smell it when it's happening to you. And so let's talk. What do you do when someone hits you with a hardball tactic? What's the first response? Suggestions? What do most people do when they're struck? There you go. The right answer. One of the most efficient things when someone hits you with a hardball tactic is to strike back. So one thing that I have seen used very effectively is vendor walks out, gives someone 10 minutes, take it or leave it. This is my final offer. By the way, they almost always say those words. Take it or leave it. It's my final offer. And they usually say till hell freezes over. I've actually used those terms. No, I just thought maybe with global warming we're going to have to change that. But in any event, I'll tell you what happened in one of my mediations. The OK supplier, as the fellow's leaving, says, "Bravo, bravo." And I thought, uh-oh. Come back and slug him or something. And then he turns to Ms. Affable. And Ms. Affable starts right out with, "You must feel terrible." And he says, "No." He said, "I think it's a great performance." If he wants to stay outside, that's okay with me. But you'll need to go get him soon, because I'm leaving in 9 minutes. So when he comes back to find out my answer, the room's empty. So she said, "Listen, don't be angry." He said, "I'm not angry. I'm not angry. But we can do the process the way it makes sense. Or, in 9 minutes, I'll leave. I want to give him an opportunity. I want to be fair." So, of course, Ms. Affable, especially since she's been affable all day, right, says, "What makes sense?" And, okay, talks with counsel, and comes back and says, "We're not changing the 9 minutes, it's 7 minutes now. I want to do $300,000 business, and I'll come down 5 cents if he comes up 5 cents. So she says, "I don't know if I can sell that. It's just, talking with you isn't going to do me any good. You're not the decision maker. You don't have to, you can stay here or leave. There's 6 minutes. She got up, she left, goes talks, and the guy comes back and says, "We'll go up to 65 if you come down to 75, but we won't do $300,000 business." Okay, vendor, but good negotiator, says, "Is that because you've got suppliers overseas who are cheaper?" "Yes." "Fine, I'll lower my price to such and such," whatever it was, "and we'll do $200,000 business, but you've got to come up to 70 cents. He says, "They'll never take it. He's going to be angry at me." He says, "Instead of being angry at you, he can come back in the room and negotiate for himself. And there's 2 minutes left." That deal closed. Went out, came back, and made the deal. Now, all that happened is, if someone strikes you, don't wait for the good guy to come and empathize with you. Stand up, strike back, and then open the door. Or who's the president? Have something, right? An iron fist and a velvet glove, talking to somebody, right? Teddy Roosevelt, yes? Look at my wife. You're saying yes? Okay, so it's Teddy. So there you have it. And it's real, happens all the time. One thing you can do when someone strikes you is strike back and then hold out an olive branch. But remember where you have to be. If they're a hardball, you cannot be sucked in, you cannot be co-opted. You can't allow those things to happen to you. But you can be unbelievably pleasant and cheerful. And you can use humor so effectively because the tactic of good guy, bad guy is so laughable. So you can laugh at what's happening instead of get angry. The second tactic that is quite common is simply to call out and do the reverse. That is to say, "Feels to me like you're using hardball tactics, good guy, bad guy." And I can understand that, it works a lot. But I just want to make sure I understand what hardball's saying. Hardball's saying that my 80 cents is too high. And Hardball's saying he's got somewhere else to go tonight. He didn't have a lot of time to keep going. And he's angry I've made too little movement. And Hardball's saying that he likes my product, but he resents the fact I raised my prices without directly contacting him. And this all happened because we weren't talking with each other. Is that right? And counsel will say, yes, it's right, and that's why he's so angry at you. You say, I did it wrong. That wasn't the right thing. I should have told him before I raised the prices. I know it's a competitive market. I'm sorry about that. So what are we going to do now? Let's talk about what we can do. And then you make the offer. How much business is he doing overseas? What prices is he doing it at? What kinds of incentives can I go? And what can you do so we can make a deal? And what's amazing is that when you ask the other side for what you can do to make a deal, they'll almost always tell you. It's really that simple. It happens most of the time. But it only happens in a context that you've humanized yourself. So when someone engages in a hardball behavior, call it out, explain your understanding of why they're being such a jerk, and acknowledge that you were part of the reason they're acting like a jerk, and then ask for help. How do I make this better? How many of us all, in our relationships with our partner or our spouse, or our good friends, how many of us, when we've done something wrong, figure out to say, look, I've been a jerk, but I want to make it right. You know, that's what you say. And does the other person say, you've been a jerk, you'll always be a jerk, see you later? Maybe, but then you're probably not in a partnership or marriage. Hopefully not. So you can actually transfer what we know about friendships and personal roles and relationships by simply humanizing yourself when the other side acts like a jerk in a hardball. Because I don't know, I learned about cognitive dissonance once, and I'm not going to tell you that. But it's very hard to keep in mind that someone's both a jerk and really nice. You can't hold them, it doesn't hold together right in our mind. So we end up, winner take all, making a choice between them. And so give that person who's behaving like a jerk not the response they expect, that you get angry or you get afraid. Give them a bond, give them a relationship, directly or indirectly, and what will happen is, overwhelmingly, people will choose not to continue being a jerk. I know, it sounds so simple, it must not be true. I do this 3 or 4 times a week. I would do it 5 times a week, but I have students to teach 1 day a week, and 1 afternoon a week that I have to prepare. So I raise these just as a couple of ways. There's a whole list of alternatives. I'd be glad to answer questions later. I thought it might be fun to tell you why I love being a mediator. I just telling you about a few of the mediations. Jane and I had dinner last night. We ordered a pitcher of sangria. Can I say that on this? Pepperdine, we're not allowed to mention liquor because it's a dry campus. So I can't even use it in examples. I mean, I like my class and I like my students. It's not worth getting thrown out. But sometimes you do have, dinner and have a pitcher of sangria. And we sat there trying to remember over the last, several months, some of the times I came home all fired up and excited and needed someone to listen to me. And these are just some of the stories of how peacemaking does work. I'm not saying it works in international situations. We'll talk about that later. It's a very different context. That's for Dennis Ross to handle and for Ken Feinberg to handle. Both wonderful speakers. I've heard them both. And actually, Bob Manukin, who's a classmate of mine, does it too. But he also does mediations like I do, in more important companies. But he's in this sort of camp. He's written a great book called Beyond Winning, Ways of Creating Value, so I strongly recommend it. First, I'm going to tell you about a meter reader. He was fired by a company president whose company had been bought by an international company and who had been given a non-negotiable order, works in California, of course, to terminate anyone suspected of filing a false or exaggerated injury report for workers' comp. Just that simple. Workers' comp has unbearably high rates, or did in California, and they always got money. And so this international company came up with a solution. They'd rather pay the lawyer and terminate all the workers who got injured. After all, if you don't have any workers injured in your employ, you don't have any workers' comp. Not a nice policy, but it was their policy. So it's sent to mediation. And the company president is required by our local court to appear, along with this meter reader. They come in the room, and they're not in the room, this is a very short mediation, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and it's apparent that the meter reader has some disabilities, emotional, mental deficiencies. When he speaks, the way he holds his head, this is someone, I don't do IQ, but I'm sure it was between 80 and 90. And of course, when I've read the briefs, he reads meters. It's a limited task. In fact, in today's technology world, there will be no meter readers in a few years because people will drive by homes and it'll all be automatically through the internet recorded and so forth. So He's been fired. What happened is, he tells his story. Because he was clearly the person to talk with, I said, I'd really be interested in learning what happened. And he just explains that he's been doing this since he was 16 years old. It's the only job he's ever had. And I'm looking at it, this is a man about 40. And he's the sole support of his mother. He has no brothers and sisters. They live together in a single apartment. He gives me the address, all very detailed. It's all, he knew he was going to be asked this question, and he's got it all laid out. And you can see him trembling as he's telling the story. And he dropped something when he was reading the meter. He bent down, he stood up, and he hit his head on the meter, and he passed out. And when he woke up, he was really ill. And that evening, he was vomiting and he had headaches. And the next evening, so I said, "Can I interrupt you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Didn't you have a doctor you can call at the company or something? Or could you go to the hospital?" And he said, "I didn't want to lose my job." He said, "I have to work. I've never been sick." He said, "If I tell them that I'm sick, I'm going to get in trouble." And so I said, "Okay, I can understand that." So he goes on and he explains how ill he became. And he was apparently nauseous and threw up and work and things, and ended up in the emergency room, which you might expect because he was so ill, and someone literally picked him up and took him to the hospital. And the doctor there told him to stay home for 5 days. So he did. And automatically workers' comp claims are filed, not even by him, because you've got to file a workers' comp claim when one of your workers is injured on the job, is taken to a hospital, and he was fired because the policy was cleared up. So the company president hears all this. And this whole thing didn't take 10 minutes. And he says, and he's shaking his head. He said, "I'd like to help you." And he said, "Just give me back my job." And he said, I'm not going to do that." He said, excuse me, emotional. He said, "We're going to find something to train you for. We're going to give you training so you can have a job that'll be here 5 years from now." Now, what you have to ask yourself is, how did this get to court? Got to court because a contingency fee lawyer heard this story from someone who thought, what a good case. And the lawyer was saying he wanted, a large amount of money for this. And when he heard the president, he wanted even more money for all of this. But the case got settled rather quickly because that was the nature thing. And I had to arrange for the company to pay the lawyer's fees, of course, because there was no money involved. There was no contingency to be paid. So one of the things that clearly happens in mediation is if you give people an opportunity to be who they are with each other, they leave their role. He left the role as president subservient to an international company. And of course, the meter reader was given an opportunity to do something more than what he could do when he failed out of high school at 16 or left high school to go to work doing the only thing he could learn how to do, which was read a meter. The second story. This one I actually did something other than just listen. It's my favorite. It's a transportation company. There's a big dispute. Several trucks were rented for a movie deal. The movie funding got shorted. Some of the trucks were lost or used on other movies. There was a large amount of money owed, and the movie company comes in and the transportation company comes in, and there's a dispute about everything. And people sit down around the table, they introduce themselves, and I do notice that there's two people who look alike. There's a man in his early 70s, slender, about 5'6", Central European, balding, and he's got the same last name as the guy who's on my right, not the left side of the table, who's a large man, about 40, looks just like the other guy, except 75 pounds heavier and 35 pounds younger. this mediation goes on and on and on, and they're fighting about everything. And I decide one of the many techniques you learn to do is not just break people up, but change rooms and change combinations of people. And so I'm doing all of this and quite busy with my tactics, hoping a miracle will happen as I keep the conversation going. And I give people assignments in different rooms. You talk about the number of trucks and where they went, and you talk about how the invoices were sent to whom, and compare the records. And then each of you are going to come back, and you'll all sit together, and we'll work through this, I tell them. I know this can settle. And I thought it might. The problem was my secretary comes and runs and gets me and says, "What do I do? Call the police?" What do you mean? They're fighting in there. So I'm in one of the rooms. I take the two people who are there. I said, "Come on with me." We run in there, and sure enough, the old fellow is fighting with the much heavier, younger person. And two of us get the heavier son, as it turns out. And one is able to pull the father away, and they're screaming. And there's no question that the son is throwing blows, and the father has been hit. I mean, he's been hit. There's no question about it. And I'm thinking, and my secretary, "Do I call the police?" I said, "No, you don't call the police." And I didn't know what to do, of course, because they don't teach us in school how to handle this. And but it became apparent that they were fighting, and they were father and son. It was my suspicion with the same last name, but I never had a mediation where opposite sides fought. It's always people on the same side. So, not physically. This is my only physical fight. So I said to this guy, and I just grabbed him. I said, "Come on." I said, "We're going out." He looks at me and said, "We're going out now." He said, "Will I be back? Should I take my stuff?" I said, "Of course you'll be back." I grab him like we're friends, arm in arm. We walk out. We walk out the front door, and we get in the elevator. And he says, "Where are we going?" Just going. Get to the front door after we get to the ground floor, and I walk out. And I still remember, I turn right, get to the end of the block. He starts to turn around to go back. I still have my arm like this. He shakes it loose, I said, didn't say a word. So he walks around the block, goes the next quarter of the block. We get to the corner, and I go like this. He goes like that. Then I realize I'm getting on the forced side. I'm going to get back to the front door of my building. And I still haven't said anything. And I'm thinking. And then it slipped out. It just slipped out. Best question I ever asked in a mediation. I said to him, "Tell me, you going to speak to your mom tonight?" He goes like this. I said, "What are you going to tell her about hitting your dad?" That's what I said. And he looks at me, and I thought, I said it softly. It was genuine. It was sincere. But it did occur to me I was in some danger. So I just listened. I tried to look as confident as I could look about that being a good, genuine question. And he doesn't say anything. I guess he learned from me. I don't know. And we walk back. We go in the door. I said, "Are you ready to go up?" He nods his head and doesn't say anything. He walks in the door. As he walks back towards the room, you can see the father retreat. This is obviously not the first time they've been in a fight. And he goes up to his father, and he said, "I've been doing this for years." He said, "And I realized now how foolish I've been." And the father then says to the transportation people, he said, "Look," he said, "we're going to do this and this. This was my business. I gave it to my son, and we've been fighting for 20 years. He said, "I should have stepped in a lot earlier. I was trying to show him that I was right, and I knew how to run it, and he didn't know what he was doing. And that's why I've sat on the other side of the table, and that's why I've kept quiet." He said, "So this matter is settled." And they walked out together. So that was a good question. What are you going to tell your mother? I haven't been able to use it a lot. But both of these stories really come from liking people, from trying to feel what must be going on and trying, and it's a cheap word, but trying to empower them, trying to respect them the best you can, not demonizing them, not assuming they're a jerk so they must be a jerk, not assuming they've done something venal so they must be venal, but stepping back and giving them the opportunity to be a whole, healthy person. And when you give people that opportunity, consistently they find it. I mean, I've got proof. I'm busy. You know? They're not all new people. I get repeats from the lawyers. Let's take questions. Let me look. Let me tell you about it. A big mistake, although it was my favorite question, just a different iteration. Let me take questions, and I'll tell you where it works too. There was this very young, handsome television star who was previously a very well-known athlete. This is not O.J. Simpson. And he was introduced in Hollywood in a rather lavish party as being a real young talent by a New York agent. In California, we have a law that if you're unlicensed as a talent agent, you're not entitled to receive a talent agent fee. The contract's voidable. The same way as if you're an unlicensed physician, you can't do surgery on someone, and if you did, you can't get paid if they can pay you. And the lobbyists, apparently, for Hollywood movie agents are every bit as powerful as medical lobbyists, so the law applies to talent agents. So, in any event, as a result of this party, a $4 million contract was signed. And this fellow got himself a lawyer, good firm, and they advised him, since it was a New York talent agent who paid for the party, induced him, made the deal, and wrote it up. He was acting as a talent agent in California illegally, and the contract was void ab initio from the beginning. So he didn't pay him anything. So I listened to the story, and I have to tell you my heart was with the New York agent, although no one needed my empathy or cared about it in any way. The New York agent wanted his $400,000, and the Hollywood TV star wanted to keep the whole $4 million and pay his lawyer whatever he was paying his lawyer instead. So I tried the technique, which I'll give you where it worked later, if someone asks the question. I said, and I made a lot of mistakes here. First, I said it in the room with everybody present. I just tell you, if you're a negotiator, if you have anything to remember, don't actually get your ego so far out in front of you that you think you can do magic. And all of us as negotiators sometimes love when everybody's there. It's kind of like having an audience. And when I did trials, it was neat to have an audience of the jury who had to stay there and everything. And the judge and the bailiff and whatnot. So sometimes we mediators will keep everybody together when they should be separate, because we can show how skilled we are at subtle communications and keeping 5 people going. Sometimes it's a mistake, mostly. So anyway, here they are all in the room, and I'm thinking, I'm going to embarrass this young star into pain by asking some very clever questions. So I said to him, you know, I flattered him. I did like Ms. Affable can do that if I'm required to do so. I flattered him. I told him I hadn't seen the show and I was going to watch it now in the future. I was really impressed that how effective apparently he had been in Hollywood, and there was talk, I read about it, I recognized him. I had only thought of him as a ball player, and here's a guy with a real skill set. And he seemed pretty peacocked and pleased, so I thought it was time. See, I'm good guy and bad guy. And I said, you have children? He said, one. I said, I was sitting here listening to everyone. And he's almost 70 years old. He's had a whole career as a talent agent. And you're in your late 20s. And I was imagining if the situation were reversed, and you not only had children, you had a grandchild. And these were the declining years of your acting. And you wanted to share with your grandchild something you did. Would you say to your grandchild, these are the last years that I'm acting, and I got a $4 million contract, and I know that this fellow got it for me, and I owe him $400,000, but here's a way you don't have to pay it. And as you grow up, you want to keep these things in mind, because you can be a lot better off financially. Well, not only didn't I get an answer, but the lawyer stood up, he stood up, they both left, leaving the room a little more empty. The other side was still there, saying, why did you ask that question? And 3 days later, I got a call from the state bar that an ethics complaint had been filed against me for being biased and for abusing someone. So I told them the story, and they went away. And I asked myself, what did I do wrong besides keep them all in the same room? And probably a lot. But mostly, I presumed that whom I like to fancy myself on are the same values that he had. And I tried to shame him. I didn't exactly say that to myself. I said it to you as I'm telling the story because I know now how I misbehaved. And so I was holier than thou for about 3 seconds before they vacated the room. The interesting thing is that that kind of approach, done in private and done appropriately, is one of the most efficient ways to humanize someone. And to give you an example, we had a lady who had I don't do slip and falls, but I did this one because somebody I went to high school with was a attorney, and she was suing a major international retailer. She was severely injured because she slipped on water that was in front of the cash register because the person who cleans the floors was supposed to clean after 10 o'clock when the store closed, started at 9:45 because they had to get home early. And she slipped on the water, but of course there were all the little yellow signs, and she wasn't supposed to walk to that cash register. She was supposed to walk to the one over, and she slipped, moving to the next one. And she broke her arm and so forth. And the retailer, who's well known for this, I mean, it's published in all our little journals, doesn't settle cases, period. They just don't settle them. If there's soft tissue damage, if there's pain and suffering, they'll pay for the medicals, but they won't pay for pain and suffering. They'll only pay for actual lost wages, and she wasn't working. She was a spouse who was a housewife. And that's the end of it. There's no money in it. They've paid the medical expenses. Thank you very much. You want to go to trial, you go to trial. You were out nothing. You were uncomfortable. And they found statistically that they do better off with that position. So this is going back and forth, and I go into the room with her, and I say, help me, tell me something. You're asking for a large six-figure sum. I imagine you were in a lot of pain. And and the lawyer chimes in. I said, stop. I was just being nice. I really wanted to know something. If you get this money, what will you do with it? Which is a better way to ask the question. And she said, my daughter's getting married. I need this money for the wedding. I said, $100 and some thousand for the wedding? She said, no, I only need $25,000 for the wedding, and then I have to pay him. And so I said to him, who's my friend, Neil's his name, I said, Neil, done a lot of work on this case? He said, I get 40%. I said, you want 40% of $25,000? He said, no, we'll try it. I said, I didn't ask you that. I said, you do a lot of work. So we talked a little. I said, why don't you talk about a fair amount of money for the work you did and forget about the contingency? Because I know you're here for your client's interests, and she needs to pay for her daughter's wedding. And he said, I'm here because she's injured, and I'm going to get her what she deserves. And I said, no, it could happen that way, but it might happen that her daughter's wedding will be paid. And you'll get something that you feel is entirely fair. I'm going to leave the two of you to talk, and I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. I'm not going back into the room. I went and got a cup of coffee. I came back 10 minutes later. He told me $10,000. I said, I'll be back. It'll be taken care of. And he said, no, it won't. They litigate everything. This is a waste of time. This is a pro bono mediation. I only use you because you're my friend. I said, some friend? You don't call on me for pay. You call on me free for 3 hours. And I went in the other room, and I said to them, you know, everybody knows what happened here. Facts are clear. I said, and I know you have this policy. I said, her daughter, she can't afford the daughter's wedding. And he says, well, she doesn't need $150,000 for her daughter's wedding. I said, no, she doesn't. She needs 25, and the lawyer needs 10. So that's 35. He said, so what? That's not what they're asking. I said, if you'll let her pay for her daughter's wedding, and you'll pay the lawyer $10,000, I'll make this case go away. He said, you will not. I said, that's my problem. So he said, okay, but you'll see. I know this lawyer. So I said, I'll see. And I went in there and said, we have a deal, and we wrote it out. And all that happened there is instead of talking about laws and rights and obligations and responsibility, I was able to say to the person who'd been victimized, how can I help you in your life so you can get something you need? I was able to say to the attorney, how can I treat you with social justice and fairness? Not what you're hoping for, not what you're expecting, but what you can see as fair. I don't want to tell you what that number is. And I could say to the other people, you know you're responsible, you know you're liable, so give her something that you can afford. Now, of course, 35 was much less than that case was worth. That case was surely a $75,000 to $100,000 case of trial because her arm was broken. It was in a cast 3 months. I mean, people don't like it when big retailers put water in front of the cash register and say, you should have seen the sign over there, and you must have seen it because you were walking behind it to go to the other cash register. They don't want to hear retailers say that the floor is wet in front of the cash register. So everybody got something, but it only happened because the person who was hurt was asked how I could help you. That was the question. How can I help you? That was all it took. And, you know, the fact that the attorney didn't think this case was about her daughter's wedding doesn't matter. And I suggest to each of you as legal counsel that we do represent our clients. I did for 30 years. I'm sure you have many of you for 30 years or more. And it's worth the extra hour or two to find out about your client's life, your client's interest, your client's relationship, your client's goals in life. I've handled more employment cases over the years that I sent people to therapy. I said, I won't represent you unless you go see a therapist because you're just too much of a victim. You feel too sorry for yourself. It's not good for me to represent a victim, and it's not good for you to be a victim. So you don't find that out in the first 10 minutes. And it makes a whole lot of difference when you see a client as a whole person. So you're not asking, how can I help you, meaning, what kind of warrior can I be for you? You're asking, how can I help you, given you've already been hurt, or given you've already been sued? What's the right thing to do for you as a person? And you'd be surprised, because many times I defended companies who have policies of being real warriors. And when I said, what's the right thing for you to do as a company, if this were on the front page of the LA Times, and it's not going to be on the front page of the LA Times, I'm talking about who you are and your company, what's the right thing to do. And those cases settle. And I believe our duty, really, as a lawyer is having the good sense to be a human being and to build relationships with our clients. So that concept that we have an absolute duty of loyalty doesn't mean we have an absolute duty to carry an automatic weapon, but we have an absolute duty to ourselves as human beings and to our clients as human beings to find out the different ways we can help them. And when they say, give me a check for $500,000, you say, I can't afford it. And tell me, besides the money, what would you do with that money? Convert it to what their lives are about. Listen to them. And what you'll discover is mediation is nothing more than good communications, the same way you have in your personal relationships. or hope they have. So I'm open for whatever. And I'm going to hang around, of course.
We're going to use a microphone for questions. If I pass the microphone to you, please hold it close enough to your mouth so the microphone can pick it up and the people in the overflow room can hear you. Are there any questions? Start right here.
Mr. Gagner?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the mediation gets set up? Who calls for it? How does it get established?
It's a really good question. There's so many people who want to be in the peacemaking business, and they just don't know how it happens. In California, we're just plain lucky. There in Los Angeles, there are about 55,000 cases filed just in Los Angeles County, the largest court system in the United States, and about 30,000 a year get mediated. So the courts give you three choices. One choice is you can go downstairs to the room, alternative dispute resolution in every court, and there's a whole list of people, and they'll work for 3 hours. And if you're on that list, you have to agree to do that, and that doesn't include preparation time. And after that, they can charge whatever they want to charge. I do approximately 12 a year, 1 a month. Not all in LA Superior Court. Some are appellate court, some are federal court, but I do about 1 a month. There's some friction about all of that in California because the courts have such a backlog. They give everybody that opportunity, and the result is you can find yourself working for free for billion-dollar corporations, which is, it doesn't feel right. You have a sense everybody in the room is getting several $100s an hour but you. And they chose you. And you're not feeling quite as respected as you might feel, so you just suck it up. It's a good way to meet new people. Well, compare it. If you're looking to show someone you care and you're skilled, compare inviting someone out to lunch or breakfast and talking about how wonderful you are, or being really intuitive with them and trying to find out their magic buttons so they'll love you, and then hope someday they'll call you to be a mediator, or working for free for 3 hours and showing your stuff so that they'll come back again. When they come back a second time, without exception, unless they just don't have money or they have some other good reason, it's always no. And what's amazing is they never go and get another free mediator. If they come back the second time and you tell them you need to be paid. Now I have a total sliding scale. I've worked for not only the pro bonos, I've worked for $50 an hour, I've worked for $100 an hour, and I've certainly worked for $500 an hour. If a person can't afford it, most of the time, and frequently, more than half of my labor cases, we're talking to the company about the company paying for both sides. I just tell them, pay for both sides or this person's not coming.
So that's how to get the other party to come?
So one way is the court just sets it up for you. It's brainless. Okay? The second way is the court has a pay panel. I'm on that too. They limit your fees to $150 for the first 3 hours, and then you can charge what you want. And the third and most common way is after you've done that, people come back to you. There's no shortage of conflict in the world. And if you're out there and you're genuine and you like people, it's just a heck of a lot of fun being the oil and the gasoline engine. Until they make an electric engine. So yeah, it's really networking. It's really, I believe, doing a good job networking. We have all over Los Angeles, I know they have them here, neighborhood centers where you can do mediation, you can do landlord-tenant, you can do people who made loans to each other, you can do every kind of mediation in a community context at no charge, and a significant number of those people know lawyers, and you just tell them. Would you tell, lawyers? Would you tell your lawyer friend they did a good job for you? Don't be shy. Call the people back. Send them a card at Christmas time, do all those normal things. When you write an article, send them the article if it relates to the matter they're involved with. It's a matter of networking. And it took me a year to be making as much as a teacher, and 2 years to be making as much as somebody maybe in the lower level of the law school who is an assistant professor or professor. And by the third year, it was a very financially acceptable level. So it does take a while because you have to build relationships. But people are very responsive. So I don't mean to make it sound simplistic. It's like everything else. You have to like it a lot, and you have to spend time. It helps also to have students. You know what happens? All these students graduate law school, like my daughter, and they go to work for some law firm, and then the law firm's looking for a mediator, and they say, try my dad. By Professor Factor. It's a heck of a good way to make contact. Think about it. If you have 15 or 20 students every semester, 60 a year, and that class of 60 goes out every year, and they go join law firms, and they get all the associates are doing all the work, right? Partners are bringing in the business, and the associate says, well, you know, if you're going to mediate, which they have to do in California, you ought to try my Professor Factor. He seemed okay.
And they can remember your name.
So can I, fortunately. My parents gave me a simple one to remember. So yeah, do the things you would do to build a restaurant business or build a dry cleaner. It's all the same. Questions? Yes? You may make more as a dry cleaner.
Hold on a second. Yes, that's right. Thank you.
You said that you would comment on the difference between the negotiations and diplomacy which occurs between nations.
That's just a terrific. People joke, sometimes they're silly but serious. They say to me, you ought to go get involved in Mideast negotiations. And they're serious, you know? And here's the difference, okay? Israel, let's just take a two-party. Let's take Arafat and, oversimplified, Arafat and Rabin, who knows a lot. Okay?
They're gone. I mean, it's...
No, I have a reason for taking them.
Go ahead.
Let's take present day, and I'll go back to them. Let's take Hamas now and Israel. Israel only has about 30 political parties. So when you're negotiating on behalf of Israel, no matter what you do, there are only 28 or 29 people who have a political interest in saying you're doing it wrong. Which isn't always so easy, okay? Because it's easy for the negotiator to lose his job and easier still for the leader. So the negotiations tend to be done by staff people, not leaders, as I'm sure you know, because if the leaders go out there and they come back without a deal, they must be ineffectual. Now take a look at Hamas, or take a look, let's start with Arafat first. Okay? Arafat knows that when Begin made a deal with Sadat, Sadat was assassinated. And Arafat knows that when Rabin and he made a deal, Rabin was assassinated. So now Arafat's coming to this negotiation with the new president of Israel, the prime minister. And he knows that he has a violent faction, and he has people who are hoping just to raise their families with cultural pride and with integrity, and who want to get on with their lives, and they really don't want bombs dropping out of the sky, and they don't want their children being sent across the border either. Okay? But he knows what happened to the last two Mideast leaders, the last two Mideast agreements. One of the two leaders was assassinated in his own country, and in Rabin's case, by his own supporter. Okay? And he also remembers about Gandhi, who wasn't exactly a warrior, and so forth. And so, in the international field, when you're not representing yourself, think of the kinds of things I've said. You want to deliver social justice, being the person you are, giving respect to people. When you're coming as a leader of a country, how do you satisfy 30 constituents that you're doing the right thing? How do you deal with a situation where your own country is divided as to what's the best thing to do? So it's just a lot tougher. And then when you take, which is worth thinking about, you take the problem we have with the Palestinian, I'm just called state, territories now, and Israel, They have exactly one source of water, the Jordan River, which runs along the border. This is a very serious thing. Water is pretty important. I mean, you need it for agriculture. You need it to grow crops. I don't think they do a lot of fishing in the Jordan River. They have completely different banking systems. They have completely different municipal systems. There is so many areas of tension about things that can go wrong. So when you're dealing with international and cultural problems, what you intuit would be the right thing for other people is exactly what happened to me with that Hollywood movie star. If you get the value wrong, you lose everything. And, you know, I know it's not, I'm not trying to be political, but I'm certainly comfortable in saying that when we went into Iraq, we did not appreciate the complexities of the different cultural interests and the consequences of who we armed and how we armed, and what would happen if the electricity was bombed out and couldn't be restored, and what would happen if children could no longer go to school because the streets weren't safe, and if the libraries were closed down and the museums were looted. We didn't anticipate those kinds of things that result from cultural conflicts. And I look back at Vietnam, and as probably everybody here knows, South Vietnam is one of the top tourist destinations in the world. And I lived through a period where I heard there was a domino theory, and if South Vietnam fell to the communists, all of Asia would go. Laos, Cambodia, you name it. There was no country that was Asian that wasn't going to become communist. And what we have now is a country that's a top tourist destination. People go there for hiking, they go there for the culture, they go there for a litany of things. And so I think when you're in international negotiations and you're representing such diverse cultures and you're trying to make peace, it's just tougher. But when I'm talking to you, and if we were sitting together and you had some needs, you know, and I asked you how I could help you and you thought maybe I could and I was genuine about it because we had a conflict, you might say, well, if you could start by doing this, it'd be a little easier on me, and if I could, I would do it for you. And you know that. You're responsible for yourself, and you might have to answer to your mother, your father, your brother, or your sister, your spouse, or partner, you know, later on, but you're comfortable in your own skin, and you're willing to have those conversations. So you and I can move forward towards peace. It's not so easy when you're a leader of a nation. And, you know, I've picked all these foreign countries. It's not so easy for George Bush or for Nancy Pelosi or for any of those folks out there. It's not so easy because they have so many constituencies they're trying to make happy. But when I do my little thing, I'm just trying to help people find a way they don't have to be in conflict. So it's super easy. It really is. And it's a lot of fun. I hope that answers it. I know it's probably too political for some people, but I don't know how to explain it.
Well, thank him for a wonderful lecture, and these are gifts as a token of our appreciation. You didn't get this bag, I wouldn't. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful.